We are Life Church Livonia.
All right, good morning, Life Church Livonia. How is everyone today? Hey, it is really good to see you. My name is Brian. I'm the pastor here. And before I jump into my sermon, I just want to have a really brief family meeting. Can we have a family meeting for a moment? Okay, here we go. We're going to do it even if you didn't say yes, all right? So that's the way it works here. We are really blessed to be here at this school. Riley Upper Elementary has been an incredible opportunity for us to become a church at a more deep level than we ever had before. And one of the things that we've been blessed with is that they never use this stage. And so every week we push our stuff back, we roll out some curtains, and it stays set up, and it saves us an immense amount of work on a Sunday morning. But they've started a drama club at their school. I'm really glad they started a drama. Some people are like, oh no. What that means is that we get to remember that we're a church plant. We forget that sometimes. We think, oh, we're an established church now. No, we are 3.5 years old and we rent an elementary school for our church. And so it gives us an opportunity, an amazing opportunity for people to remember that. And some of you have been with us from the very beginning. You remember what it was like when we first were at Holmes Middle School a few years ago and we're setting everything up and tearing everything down every single week. Well, we are there again. We are there again. And what that means is that it's an opportunity, I think, really for us. For some of you, maybe who have joined us a little bit later in the game, it's your turn to have an opportunity to be not just an attender at Life Church Livonia, but to be invested and engaged. And it's an opportunity because I really believe that you don't really get connected, and this doesn't really feel truly like church home to you until you are a part of it. And so we have room on our teams to grow in that way to kind of help us really live into what God's called us to do here, which is to help people who are far from God draw closer. And so if you are interested in serving, we have room on our teams for setup and tear down, skilled and unskilled help with regards to what we do here in the room. We also have room on our teams and hospitality of helping serve donuts and coffee and all the stuff we do there. We have room on our teams for kids ministry. So I just thought this is an awesome opportunity to have a family meeting and to say, listen, we're in this together. And I believe that we are better together. And if you want to get to know people, one of the best ways to do that is to sign up for a team. If you're interested a little bit later in the service, just write it on your connection card that you're interested in serving, and someone will follow up with you because we're going to have to start tearing it all down starting today. And so, yeah, fun times. Here we go. Somebody's got to get here a little. Yeah, I mean, the band, guys, give it up for the band. Because first of all, they're amazing. And second of all, they get here earlier than you, a lot earlier than you to make this happen. And it's really amazing. So hey, we're starting a brand new series today. It's called I Choose. And the reason we've chosen this series, honestly, is because all of us are the product of the decisions that have been made in our life up until this point. Some of those decisions are ones you made, and some of those decisions are ones that were made for you. But we are all a product of the choices we've made up until this moment. And if your life had a history tab on it, like your computer does, your life would maybe make a lot more sense. You'd be able to go back in the history tab and be like, oh, well, I did this. I decided to do this. I actually didn't engage that decision when I probably should have made a choice. So sometimes it's a matter of what we choose to do or what we choose not to do that defines us today. And so we realize that our decisions, our choices every single day are incredibly important, and they define who we are. The good news is that, and part of what we are all about here at Life Church Livonia is to help you understand that the history, your history, doesn't have to define your tomorrow. That the way you've lived prior to today, the way you've lived prior to this season of your life doesn't necessarily have to define you tomorrow or the next day, because we get to make new decisions and choose new things for our life. And the best decision that we could ever make is to invest in our relationship with God. This is the ministry of Jesus, to come and make a way for us to no longer be defined by our poor choices, to no longer be defined by the ways that we have screwed up, but to step forward into something brand new. I love that. So choices matter. And yet so often for a lot of us, we don't really pay attention to the choices in our life. We'll agonize over choices that probably aren't that big a deal. Like we'll spend forever trying to decide what new show we're going to watch on Netflix, right? Like I'm done with my old one. What am I going to watch now? And we're polling our friends on Facebook and we're calling people what's the best show. We'll spend all this time investing in a decision that doesn't really have any lasting impact on your life. And yet we'll gloss over decisions that are really huge. And so what would it look like for us as a church, as a people, to start looking at some of the choices we make in our life that really do impact not only your today, but your tomorrow? And so we've landed on really 4 key areas of our life that honestly, I think that if we paused and we said, I'm going to look at these areas and I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to choose something different for my life that I believe that your future would change. And we do it all with God's help. God is at the core, at the center of this entire process. And so the first area that we want to look at today is choosing purpose over popularity. And next week, we're going to talk about choosing surrender over control. And some of you are like, I'm not coming next week. I'm going to control that situation by not showing up. And the week after that, discipline over regret. I know that there's probably every single person in this room has experienced a moment where they look back and they're like, if I had only been a little bit more disciplined. So we choose discipline over regret. And finally, we'll wrap up by talking about how do we choose what's important over what's urgent? What's important in our life over what's urgent. But today we start with purpose over popularity. So what I want to do as we start that is I want you to imagine something. Imagine living in a world where everyone likes you, where everyone approves of what you do and what you say and what you think. Imagine a world where everyone in your life admires you and looks up to you. Now I want you to imagine that you live all by yourself in the mountains or in the forest, because that's the only place that would ever happen. It's the truth. The only way to achieve that is to never see another human being. It's not reality. And yet we live in such a way that we're trying to seek that out. We're trying to make that become our reality, and it's not possible. Now I want you to go in a different direction and imagine what it would be like to wake up every day not being consumed by your quest for approval from other people, but instead to be so wrapped up in your relationship with God that the approval of other people just didn't matter as much anymore. It's not that the people around you don't matter. It's not that you start to ignore people and you don't care about people. No, it's that what they think about you isn't what defines you. But instead, what defines you is the purpose at the core of who God made you to be. We believe that every single one of you was made on purpose by God, for a purpose by God. And that God alone knows what that is in your life. Imagine what that would be like. Some of you can't imagine. You're like, I have no idea what it would even be like to no longer care as deeply about what other people think about me. And if you think that you maybe are the kind of person that doesn't really care what people think, I want you to imagine doing some skill or some task in front of everyone. I want you to imagine the difference between singing in the shower and singing on stage as a solo. And you suddenly realize, oh, I actually do care what people think about me. It's tough. It's a battle that we have. And that we have a choice to make. And I think it's one of the biggest choices we have to make. Are we going to choose purpose over popularity? And some of you are also thinking, well, popularity really isn't a big deal to me. But really what we're talking about when we say popularity is we're talking about approval. Because all popularity is curated approval. The higher your people's approval of you goes up because of your abilities, your looks, your station in life. The higher the approval goes up, the more popular you are. It's just the way it works. Popularity is curated approval, both earned and unearned. And so what would it look like for us to choose purpose, to live our life for the approval of God, to live our life in a way that we're seeking our primary goal is to please God rather than living our life in a way that is seeking the approval of others. And I am convinced that when we do that, when we discover what we were uniquely made to do and we do those things, that it makes God smile. That this pleases God deeply. But most of us wander through life either never even understanding or never knowing what that purpose that we were uniquely made for is, or we learn it and then we forget about it. We begin to get a sense of what it is. We never pursue it. We never go hard after it. We get discouraged and we give up in the pursuit of our purpose. I'm so convinced that this is crucial for every single one of us. Because listen, if you don't know the purpose of something, you either misuse it or you discard it. If you don't know the purpose of something, you either misuse it or you discard it. A couple of years ago, I was working in my basement because we always end up buying houses that have tons of projects. It just is what we do, right? And we were living in Muskegon at the time, and I was working on finishing up our basement. And honestly, I really didn't know what I was doing because I didn't learn a lot of those skills growing up. I've just discovered it on my own. YouTube is my friend, okay? But I don't even know what I did before YouTube. I went to the library and got books or something to figure out how to do these things. And I was struggling through some of these projects and not really knowing how to do some of them. And a friend of mine came over while I was working on my basement, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to help. Is there any way I can help?" I said, "Absolutely. My tools are out in the garage. Go grab whatever you need and come down. I'm working on finishing up these electrical boxes and these outlets and putting on the covers and stuff like that." And he comes down to my basement with this. Isn't that an awful noise? He comes down to my basement with this, and I'm like, "Bro, I have screwdrivers in my toolbox that aren't broken." And he's like, no, this is the perfect tool for what you're doing right now. And I'm like, it looks broken to me. It looks like someone took a screwdriver and tried to pry something, and they bent it and then fixed it with electrical tape. And now it doesn't even stay in. It's like, how are you supposed to screw things in with that? And he said, no, you don't understand. The purpose of this tool is exactly what you're currently doing to screw those light switches in really quickly without having to turn your wrist over and over and over and over again. You just stick it in and spin it. I had no idea. I don't even know where this tool came from. Someone probably brought it over to my house at some point and left it there, and because their name's not on it, it's mine now. That's the way it works, right? If you leave something at my house and your name is not on it and you don't come back to claim it very quickly, I'll sell it on eBay. It's just the way it works. I've never done that, but I've wanted to, okay? I had no idea what the purpose of this tool was. So I had, in my brain, discarded it as useless. It was sitting there the whole time. I could have used it. It would have made the job that I was doing a lot easier. And yet I didn't understand its purpose. So now I want you to imagine something again. I want you to imagine that maybe you're going through the garage of your great uncle or your grandparent or something. You're cleaning out their stuff. They've passed away and they've left everything to you. And you're going through the garage and you come upon a box full of tools and you pull it out and you think to yourself, I have no idea what any of these do. So you have a couple of options in that moment. What do you do with that box of tools that you don't know their purpose? You can either throw them away. You can donate them to the Salvation Army. You could give them away to someone else that might actually figure it out. Or you can totally misuse them and turn them into some cool craft project you saw on Pinterest. This is what most of us do, right? Or we could pursue the answers to what are these tools made for? How would you do that? Well, if it's your grandparents, the first thing you'd probably do is go to your parents and say, "Hey, Dad, I found this in Grandpa's toolbox. I have no idea what it is. Do you know?" And if your dad said, "Well, I don't know, ask your mom." You ask your mom. She has no idea. You ask around. No one has any idea. But then as you're looking at the tool, you realize, oh, hey, there's actually a name on it. And it looks like it's the manufacturer. So you're like, oh, perfect. I can just Google it. I'll look up that manufacturer. You go online and you find the company. It's still in business, but you can't find this particular tool on their website. So what do? You call the manufacturer and they say, actually, yeah, here's what that tool does. We stopped making that in 1985, but we have a spec sheet. I'll send you the spec sheet on it. It'll tell you exactly what the purpose of that tool is. So now you understand its purpose. Now it's not something just to discard anymore. It's something you can actually utilize. And you can utilize it in the way that it was designed so you're not misusing it. The same thing happens with us, with you and I. Because we don't understand our purpose, we don't understand what it is that we're designed for, we either misuse our life, misappropriate the resources that we have internally, or we discard our life because we think that we don't matter. If we look at all the other people around us, we think, compared to them, I don't really have any true deep purpose. And so we discard our own life. And we do that not by ending our life, we do it by wasting our life. And never fully living in. If you don't know the purpose of something, what do? If you don't know the purpose of something, ask its creator. This makes sense. If you don't know the purpose of something, ask its creator. That's why you would, if you couldn't figure out the purpose of the tool, you would look up the manufacturer, the one who made it. And if you don't know your purpose, what do? You ask your creator, who knows you and loves you and has gifted you and created you for specific things, a calling. And we all long to know it. But instead of asking our creator, we ask other people. Maybe not out loud. Maybe you're not the kind of person that walks around and says, hey, what's my purpose? Why am I here? You don't say that, but you read the people around you by how they approve or disapprove of what you're doing. And the more approval you get, it's like the meter of likes goes up in your life. The way that people affirm you or don't affirm you, you decide what it is you're good at or what you're really terrible at, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. And the approval of others begins to define our purpose. They don't know. Just like you and I, the people around you, they don't know. They might have a hint of what you're good at, but no one knows you better than the creator. If you don't know your purpose, ask your creator. Because otherwise you will end up in a space where you're misusing your life or you've discarded your life. And one of the things that I love about the Bible, going back to it over and over and over and over again and seeing myself there, is that it's filled with people that are just like you and I. Filled with people that are flawed, that are not perfect, that struggle with a lot of these same things. So what we're going to do the rest of today is we're going to look at some of those people. We're going to look at some of those people that struggle to find their purpose and how it changed them when they did. And I think in the midst of that, we're going to learn a few things about ourselves. And some of you are sitting here hopeful. You're thinking, Brian's going to tell me what my purpose is today. Nope. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. The reason I'm not going to do it is because I'm not your creator. So my hope is that today will point you towards yours. And the first person I want to look to is Moses. Moses is one of those guys that even if this is your first time ever coming to church, you probably have a familiarity with who Moses is because you probably saw the movie Prince of Egypt. And so if you're not familiar with Moses, just a really brief background on him. Here's a guy that was born a slave, a Jewish slave, a Hebrew slave in the land of Egypt. They'd been kind of conquered, okay? He's a slave. And so, but because of a crazy story that we don't have time for today, he ends up adopted by the daughter of the Pharaoh. Basically, the daughter of the king adopted him and brings him into their household, and he grows up living in the lavish palace, basically, of the Pharaoh of Egypt, the leader of Egypt. This is Moses. But then what happens is through a series of events, he ends up discovering his identity. He discovers who he is. He discovers his roots as a Jewish man. He begins to identify with his people. He meets God in the midst of that, and it changes everything. And now he discovers his true calling, his true purpose. And in that moment, when he begins to see his purpose kind of being displayed in front of him by his creator, he has a choice to make. A really important choice. Will I choose the comfort that comes with my whole life that I grew up with? This is incredible, the amount of comfort you could have. Or will I choose that, or will I choose my calling? Will I choose the popularity that honestly he probably didn't even earn, he got because of his position in the household of the Pharaoh? Or will I choose my purpose that's given to me by God? And honestly, Moses fought his purpose. When God said, this is what I made you for, Moses was like, So honestly, he had an argument with God about his purpose. But then this is what they say about him. And so we go into the book of Hebrews, which is in the New Testament. And we go back and we say, what did they say about Moses? This is what they said. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of life. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. He chose purpose over popularity. He chose his calling over the comfort that they had to offer him. Why? Because he found something deeper. He found something more long lasting. He found something that was more filling ultimately than anything else that all of the riches of Egypt could have offered him. What he found was his purpose. What he found was his identity. What he found was something that could not be purchased. It could not be won through skill. It could not be achieved through hard work. The only way to achieve and to receive what Moses got was to get it directly from the Creator, who looked at him and saw him and knew him and said, I have something important for you to do. And it started with Moses choosing little things in life. This is how it begins. So the question that some of us are wrestling with in the room right now is, if purpose is so important, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for me to figure it out? Why is it so hard for me to get a hold of? And I think part of it is this, is that we spend so much time, honestly wasting time, searching for our grand purpose. Like the ultimate, like, what am I meant to be? And we think it's a job usually, and we're usually wrong. What is my grand purpose? And then what happens is sometimes we think we've grabbed a hold of it, but it's actually more of a task than it is a calling. And we complete the task, and then we're like, what do we do now? I thought that was my purpose. Or we try it and it fails. I thought that was my purpose. And we spend all this time looking for this grand purpose, this big P purpose in our life. And we miss the opportunities that God gives us every single day to live into our daily small P purposes. The things that actually help unfold and unveil for us what we were truly designed to do and who we were designed to be. And so we end up with an entire generation of people living in their parents' basement thinking that their purpose is to play Fortnite. Some of you are like, I don't even know what Fortnite is. If you do, then you know. It's a video game. That is not your purpose. It's not. But they'll sit there, and I'm not making fun of it. We do this generation after generation, it happens. And if we don't have a strong cultural sense of purpose, like corporate purpose, and it becomes very individualized, then we labor over this. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. And because we haven't figured out what we're supposed to be, we do nothing. And we sit and we wait, waiting for our grand purpose. And so instead of purpose catalyzing us towards action, our search for purpose paralyzes us. It paralyzes us and puts us in a place where we don't even know what to do next. We don't know where to go next. Purpose isn't found through a grand message in the sky. Purpose isn't found even the way you think maybe it happened with Moses. But with Moses, you're like, well, hold on. Moses had a burning bush. Like, I'd be good with that. Like, if God appeared to me in a burning bush and spoke my purpose over me, that would make my life a lot easier. But what you don't realize is that wasn't the only thing that Moses did. That burning bush moment came after he had already made decisions to pursue his identity in God over his identity as a prince of Egypt. That purpose, he found that purpose after years of tending sheep. Our purpose is found in the daily, simple rhythms of life. And ultimately, that grand purpose, it might become clear to you, but it might not become clear to you until years and decades later. And if we wait for that to move forward, then we miss all those other opportunities to grow into that place that God gives us every single day and invites us into through daily rhythms, through daily acts of obedience. And once you've found your purpose, it changes everything. Some of you, I think, if you're like me, your life feels like it's one big distraction. Like you think you might have figured out what your purpose is, but you feel distracted constantly from it. And one of the things that happens when you find it, when you hold on to it, is that purpose diminishes distractions. Finding your purpose diminishes distractions. And for many people, one of the biggest distractions is comparison. It distracts us from who we are and who we're meant to be. Instead of looking at our identity, instead of looking to the Creator for our identity, we look at the people around us and we think to ourselves, well, she's already finished with school. He's going to retire early. And here I am, I'm not going to retire until I'm 150 at this rate. You look at other people and you're like, well, everyone's married except for me. I might not ever get married. Everyone has a family except for me. Those people, they already bought a house and they're only 23, and here I am. I'm going to be living in my parents' basement until I'm 83. And we compare, and it's a distraction to our ultimate purpose. And when we find that purpose through our daily rhythms, it begins to diminish those distractions. Nobody embodies what it looks like for purpose to kind of diminish distractions better, I think, in the Old Testament than Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is a character that maybe some of you are familiar with, others maybe not at all. The thing he's most known for is that he rebuilt the wall in Jerusalem. He rebuilt this wall that was protected the city where his people lived. That's what he's known the most for. But if you dig into his story, you realize Nehemiah was simply a cupbearer. Basically, this guy's job was to serve this king that had conquered his people. And his job was to hand him wine. Imagine if that was your job. And not only was his job to hand him wine, his job was to taste the wine first to make sure whether it was poisoned, and so that the cupbearer would die instead of the king dying. Imagine if he defined himself by his job. Imagine if Nehemiah had decided that his purpose was defined as cupbearer. So here he is in this moment. He's serving the king, he's a cupbearer. In the very beginning of the book of Nehemiah, we see that he hears a report about the remnant of his people. The ones who weren't carried off into exile by this conquering army. And he hears that the remnant of his people are struggling deeply. The people of Israel, it is tough, struggling. And in that moment, his heart is broken for his people. His heart is broken over their plight, and he begins to pray for them, calling out to God, God help them, God help them. One of the clues to what your purpose might be is asking yourself, what breaks my heart? What is it that breaks my heart? But here's the interesting thing about it. In that very beginning part of Nehemiah, it doesn't say anything about a wall. That's what he's known for, is rebuilding the wall. Not a single time in that very first section does it say anything about a wall. Nehemiah didn't instantly know that he was going to be called to this monumental task of rebuilding this wall to protect his people. He didn't know that. He didn't even think about that in that moment. He just thinks about the plight of his people and he begins to pray for them. And here's the part we miss about his story, is that then the story jumps ahead 8 years. 8 years later, 8 years of daily rhythm of laboring over his people that are the remnant that are struggling. 8 years of praying over his people. 8 years of choosing to step into the daily rhythms of obedience to God's calling in his life. And then finally comes a moment when the king looks at him and says, why are you so sad? And Nehemiah gets to say, my heart is broken for my people. And the king says to him, well, what do you want to do about it? And he's like, I want to rebuild the wall around the city. I want to rebuild the wall so that they can be protected, so that they can have dignity and value again. And the king says, what do you need? And Nehemiah makes a list. He says, I need letters of credit from you so I can go and get supplies. I need timber from your forests. And I need all these things to rebuild this wall. And the king says, go for it. Do it. And Nehemiah starts to live into that part of his purpose. But here's the deal. His purpose in life wasn't to rebuild the wall. How do I know that? Because our purpose is not a single task. Tasks are a part of us fleshing out our purpose. Because if his purpose was defined by rebuilding the wall, he would have been purposeless as soon as it was completed. God doesn't do that to us. Nehemiah's purpose was to help rebuild his people. That job never ends. It never ended till the day he died. His job was to be a leader that helped rebuild their people. But in the midst of that movement, in the midst of that decision he made to go rebuild the wall, in the midst of that task, his life was filled with distractions from his purpose. Every step he took was a distraction. Every step he took, people opposed what he was doing, whether it was rebuilding the wall or reinstituting the reading of scriptures, all these different things that he did, people opposed him. He faced ridicule, insults, sabotage, threats against his life. And sometimes the distractions that came against Nehemiah had names. They were people. Some of you are like, I got some names of people that are distractions in my life. Like they're holding me back from my purpose for sure. In Nehemiah's life, they were named Sanballat and Geshem. Sanballat and Geshem, two of these guys that just did not want him to succeed. So they send him this letter and they're trying to pull him away from the project. And he ascertains that the reason they wanted him to leave the city was they wanted to actually hurt him. And so this is what he says to them in Nehemiah chapter 6. He sends them a letter back. I am engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent the same message. And each time I gave them the same reply. Listen, here's the deal. Why was Nehemiah able to actually hold true to his task? Because he had purpose. He said, I am doing a great work. He'd come to realize that his purpose of rebuilding, helping rebuild the nation of Israel, helping rebuild a people had great value to God. And because he realized how great the value was, he was able to say, I can't do that. That's a distraction from my purpose. That's a distraction from what God has called me to do and who God has called me to be. I can't come because I'm engaged in a great work. His purpose diminished the power of distraction in his life, no matter what it was, no matter what hurdle he had to overcome. He was one of the greatest leaders in the Old Testament. We looked at Nehemiah all the time to say, what does it look like to be a good leader? And what we realize is that he was driven by purpose that allowed him to plow right through distractions. This is Nehemiah. I'm engaged in a great work. I cannot come. When you begin to live into God's purpose for you, distractions will come. And holding on to that purpose is part of what helps diminish the distractions. From the very beginning of starting Life Church Livonia, I have faced distractions. Knowing that the part of my purpose is to do what I'm doing right now. Distraction after distraction after distraction. I had issues with my health. For the first couple of years that we lived here, I found out that I was allergic to Livonia. Literally, it's just true, okay? And every fall I would get sick. I would get bronchitis. And one year I got pneumonia. Huge distraction. It's so hard to lead and do what I do when you're sick all the time. We had issues. The very first time we ever tried to have a big meeting to gather people for Life Church Livonia, this is before we ever even had a church service. That very first day, like 30 minutes before we were supposed to leave for the meeting, my daughter fell and split her face open and had to go to the hospital and get stitches. Distractions. Over and over again, these kind of things. We had housing issues. You wouldn't, if I could tell you the issues with our house that we had and where we lived and kind of the all of the craziness of that, you would be shocked. Distraction after distraction after distraction. Interpersonal conflict based almost 100% on misunderstanding. Distractions. Comparison, when I began to compare myself to other pastors and began to doubt whether or not I was even called to do this. Over and over again. Distractions from living into my purpose. What rooted me? What is it that grounded me? What is it that drew me back? What is it that gave me the ability to plow right through those distractions? It was my daily rhythms. The daily decisions, the daily choices I made to re-engage my Creator. If you don't know what something is designed to do, who do you ask? It's Creator. What did I do? I went back to my Creator over and over and over again in prayer and reading my Bible and worship. And God would remind me why I'm here. that there are people all throughout Livonia who are far from God, who have no idea that having a relationship with God is possible, and not only that it's possible, but it is life-changing, life-transforming. And God would say, your purpose is bigger than those distractions. And I would be emboldened for those things. I found my purpose once again over and over again by remembering the daily rhythms that I was called to do. Sometimes they're little things, but when we say yes to those little things, even the things that don't seem like they have much consequence, it helps us find our greater purpose. And once we're on that path, not only will there be distractions, but there will also be pain. Not only will there be things that will try to derail you, there'll be pain in that process. We know it's true. And we also know that purpose allows you to push through the pain. We see it all throughout Scripture. We see it in the life of Moses. We see it in David. We see it in Nehemiah. We see it in Esther. We see it in Mary. We see it in Jesus himself. There will be times when you're pursuing your God-given purpose where you want to quit, where you want to give up, where it'd be way easier just to live for the approval of people. Way simpler when you just want to give up. And in those moments, we have to go back to what we read about in Hebrews, to the story of Moses, when it says that there is greater value in serving Christ. We realize there's greater value ultimately in this than anything the world has to offer. We have to go back to that. We have to go back to our daily rhythms. And if you don't have a daily rhythm, then honestly, you're in trouble in that moment. We have to have these daily rhythms or else you will never make it. You will never be able to push through the pain. I love this story of Jesus that's found in Luke chapter 22. It models what it looks like to push through the pain because you hold on to your purpose, and you do that by holding on to your daily rhythms. And we see Jesus do it himself. He's about to be arrested. He's about to be scourged on our behalf. He's about to be whipped, beaten, murdered on our behalf. And he knows it. And he's laboring over it. So in Luke 22, it tells a story. Starting in verse 41. It says, he withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed. Father, if you are willing, take this calling from me. Take this purpose from me. Take this cup from me. Father, if you're willing, I just don't think I can push through the pain to live into my purpose, the reason I'm here. And then he says this, yet not my will, but yours be done. Does that line sound familiar? If you grew up in church, it probably does. Not my will, but yours be done. Where do we hear that in other places? We hear it in the Lord's Prayer. We hear it in the spot where when Jesus' disciples came to him and said, teach us to pray. And he says, I'll teach you. And that line, not my will, but yours be done, is a line from the prayer that he taught his disciples and said, pray it every day. What does Jesus do when he's in the midst of pain? Struggling with his purpose, he goes back to his daily rhythms. Not my will, but yours be done. Do you have daily rhythms? Do you have things you do to engage God? Have you found your purpose yet? I believe this is where you find it. This is how you do it. And when you do, purpose can push you through pain. They were talking earlier about the 6K for water that we do, and we do it on behalf of children who don't have water in Africa. And when you run the 6K, your entry fee provides clean water for a child for the rest of their life. So when the first year that I did the 6K, I hadn't trained at all. I'd been sick all fall. I'd gotten bronchitis. It turned into pneumonia. I was not in a good place. It was spring. I was in terrible shape. And I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to go for it. 6K. Anyone can do that, right? That's what I told myself at least. I can do this. No big deal. When I was 20, it wouldn't have been a problem, right? That I hadn't trained. But now I'm not 20 any longer. So I'm like, I'm going to do it anyway. And I get my bib and it has the picture of this kid on it that I'm like, this kid is going to get clean water because I'm running today. And I start running, and I wasn't walking. I was jogging this thing. I was going to do it, right? And up next to me comes my mentor. The person who has mentored me in life and ministry, his name is Alex Rahill. He's the one who started Life Church in Canton. And this guy is a runner. Like his goal for his 50th birthday was to run a 50K. And here I am trying to like struggle through a 6K. And he's like talking and running, and I'm dying. And in that moment, I was really tempted, super tempted to run for his approval, to keep pace with him, to maintain the same time as him, to show him that I could do it, to pretend like I was in better shape than I was and that I was actually taking better care of my body than I really was because I know how important that is to him. I was really tempted in that moment to run for his approval. And I did it for about a mile. And I wanted to die. Really, I was struggling. And in that moment, I had this moment of clarity. I'm like, why am I here? Am I here to win the approval or win the applause of a person? Or am I here because I want to give this kid that's on my shirt clean water for life? I remembered my purpose for that day, and it changed everything. I said to Alex through like my labored breathing, it took me probably like 200 yards to get a single sentence out. I was like, you go ahead. You go ahead. You go ahead. And he did. And the rest of the race, I focused on what my purpose was, this kid. And it allowed me to push through the pain. I ran the whole thing. Not because I was seeking someone else's approval, but because I was doing it for this kid. I remembered my purpose. And it allowed me to push through the pain. This is what God's purpose in your life can do for you. So when you get to that moment when nothing seems to be working well, purpose pushes you through. When you start something and it gets so hard you want to quit, purpose pushes you through. When critics come against you, they can't stop you. When obstacles try to deter you, they can't deter you. When pain comes along in the midst of it, it doesn't slow you down. You will get up earlier, you will work harder, you will stay later. Purpose drives you. Purpose drives you. When you begin to think, I can't, you begin to realize that God can. When people begin to look at you and say, you won't, no way, you're like, with God's help, I will. Because purpose pushes us through the pain. It's an incredibly powerful force in your life because it comes from God. It comes from your Creator speaking life and truth into you. And honestly, as I look through the Old Testament figures, the people, the heroes of the faith, one of the men that I'm most drawn to is Jeremiah. I love his story. It's a hard story, but I love it. And I think that really very few people embody pushing through pain because of their purpose more than Jeremiah. And I go back to this piece of scripture over and over. You'll probably hear me preach it a dozen times if you stay at this church because it's one of my life verses. But it perfectly embodies why it matters more what God thinks than what people think. It perfectly embodies what it looks like, why we push through, why we find purpose. And it's found in Jeremiah chapter 17. This is what he says. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. Cursed is the one who lives their life seeking the approval of others. Cursed is the one who defines themselves based upon what other people think about them or what other people say about them. That person is going to be like someone who lives in a desert with no water. What lives in a desert with no water? Very few things can live in a desert with no water. You and I certainly couldn't. We can't even go a few days without water, without perishing. And God is saying to Jeremiah, listen, if you live your life dependent upon the approval of others, if you live your life in a way that seeks to please other people, you will die. You will die. And he says, but the alternative is so much better. He says, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. It means that your identity is coming from God. Your purpose is coming from God. Your purpose is coming from the Creator who made you. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. This is what it looks like to live into your daily rhythms as daily you're going back to the Creator. What am I made for? What am I made for today? What do you want me to do today? How can I be obedient to you today? How can I live my life in a way today that pleases you? And when you do that, your roots go deep and you find nourishment, something that sustains you through all the distractions, through all the pain. It's your purpose. And it comes directly from God, and it feeds your very soul. And you will never fail to bear fruit. Every single day, we have a choice to make. Every single day, we have so many choices to make. From the moment we wake up in the morning to whether or not we're going to hit snooze 5 times, whether we're going to get up, to what we're going to wear for the day, to whether we're going to eat breakfast or eat it on the run. What are we going to do? There's all these choices we make, but no choice is more important than asking yourself the question, today, will I live into the purpose God has created me for, or will I live for the approval of other people? If you choose to pursue approval, it is so fleeting. It is so temporary. It is not going to last you. But God's purpose in your life will. I'm asking you today, are you willing to choose purpose over popularity? And if that's where you're at, I want you to know that it begins with Jesus. It all begins with Jesus. We go back to the very first thing I said in my sermon today, which was talking about how we don't have to be defined by our past choices, that Jesus has said to us, I want to take care of those. I want to forgive you of those choices you made that weren't honoring to me, that weren't pleasing to me. I can forgive that. I can set you on a new path today. We have to start there. We can't jump straight to purpose. We start with connecting to God through Jesus and saying, I'm ready for you. That's where you begin. And after you've done that, then you'll learn those daily rhythms of reconnecting deeper and deeper with God every single day. And if you don't understand what those daily rhythms look like, if you don't have those in your life, that's why we're doing this Grow event that they talked about earlier. Sign up for the Grow event. Come and learn what it looks like to be disciplined during your days. Come and learn what it looks like to have daily rhythms in your life. And as you do that, you'll discover your little P purposes. And along the way, at some point in your life, you'll discover your big P grand purpose. This is huge. We want to teach you how to do that thing. The thing that only you can do. God wants to show that to you. Say yes to the small things, and he'll show you the big. I want to pray for you today, all of us today. I want to pray for those who have never stepped into a relationship with God. I pray that today is your day. It changes everything. And I want to pray for those who are in the room today who have gotten distracted, who've gotten discouraged, who've forgotten that God made you on purpose, for a purpose. Would you pray with me? So Jesus, we praise you that you know us so intimately, that you love us so deeply. We thank you, God, for that. So humbled that you know every single person in this room. You care deeply about every single person in this room. And God, here today, I'm convinced there are people that are far from you. There are people that have been living their life without you for a long time. And if you are that person here today, I just encourage you right now in the quiet of your own heart to simply pray with me and to say, God, here I am, ready to no longer be defined by my past choices, ready to be forgiven for the way that those choices have dishonored you, the way that they have been a kind of a detour away from who you made me to be. God, I ask that you would forgive me for those things. And now, God, I choose you. I choose a relationship with you. And if you're here today and you've already made that decision to follow Jesus, maybe today is the day where you decide to begin investing in the small things. You decide that you're going to go back to the rhythms that God has called you to, or you're going to learn them for the first time. And if that's you, God, I just pray that those people, that they would make a commitment today, a recommitment to invest heavily in their relationship with you, the Creator, who can speak life and hope and truth and purpose into their life. Jesus, I pray that that would begin today. Break our hearts for the things that break yours. And in so doing, point us in the direction that you would have us go. We love you. We commit our lives to you. In the name of Jesus, we pray.